Good afternoon. Today is Monday, March 31, 2014. This is a special meeting of the Commissioners scheduled for noon time. All Commissioners are present along with the County Administrator and the Budget Director. And we have with us today representatives of all three judges and top-level administrative staff from the Family Court. We're here today to discuss issues involving the budget and the appropriations that was announced by the Commissioners approximately 10 days ago. Judges, I think I'll leave it up to you to initiate the conversation with us, and then we will go from there.
Sure. I'd like to thank the board for allowing us to meet with you. We reviewed carefully the budget allocations that you gave to the court, and we responded, actually even before you finally approved that, we responded in the form of a letter to you indicating that the numbers that you were intending and did allocate were insufficient for the court. And in your response, which we appreciate, you invited us to have further discussion about that. So that's the reason that we asked for the meeting today. There were a couple items in the letter itself that question line items. I would just introduce this discussion by telling you that, to me, the line item you ought to be looking at is our bottom request. And when you compare our bottom request, it is lower than it was in 2010. We're the only criminal justice group, court, or agency that it is that low. Everybody else has increased. And frankly, if you're going to start looking at line item issues, then I think that you're invading the court's province to be a separate body. And so I'm going to ask Rick to address a few things that were in your letter first.
Just a couple items, if we could.
Interrupt. I just note the record that Judge Clark is now present also. Judge, we waited a couple of minutes and we started the meeting to discuss the family court side of this thing, and we will discuss the court side of it. Thank you.
Okay, just a couple of items. I did note that one person who was included, who was not included, was Bevan, and she did also receive a new position in 13. So I noted that in the memo there's two people noted, and actually Bevan was just placed in a new position. So that was noted. What I wanted to refer specifically to was, I think, Chris's notes at this point regarding the excess in medical. And
we're talking about the March 19th memo?
Correct, yes. And very simply, if you look at our budget numbers, when the judges came back to you and said they had removed $70,000 out of the budget, basically there was nothing left to move anywhere. And unfortunately, what was not seen was the fact that in the medical, and that's just where it was placed, is $60,000 for retirement. It could have been in benefits, could have been in any line, could have been in salary, but $60,000 in terms of retirements. And that was an estimate that was made, approximately in December. We're here to tell you today that we have probably knowledgeable retirement costs of over $40,000 that we know about, and additional retirements that probably will be coming in 14. And so $60,000 is not a significant amount of money. The other amount that was in was my calculation. I saw what Chris indicated, I believe was $15,000, I believe he indicated, put in for changes. Again, I included a figure of $25,000. I don't think that's significant, but again, understanding that we have people at zero, meaning that they opted to have no insurance, go under another spouse's insurance. If that happens, obviously that's a $12,000+ bill per. So in terms of budget, I don't think that budgeting $25,000 in excess of actual cost, it was very significant. When you add those two figures together, you're looking at a figure of $85,000. I think the way in which you looked at those numbers, there was a $99,000 overage. Again, doing simple math, that's a difference of about $14,000. So again, I just wanted to point out that those retirement figures did not appear anywhere else in the budget. That's just where the numbers fell. So when you remove that, you remove additional money. So we took $70,000 out, and then taking that additional money out obviously puts my calculations at a deficit.
So I know that from your letter and from past discussions that you're wanting the county to be cautious in regard to salaries, and we followed the line with what you had advocated with 2% raises. We were never told that when those were to start, so the April 1st is something that's news to us, although it's pretty insignificant. With regard to salary comparisons, I told you in the letter, we told you in last year's budget that we were going to undergo salary comparisons. In my letter, I failed to attach the comparisons. So, we went outside of the county looking at probation and intake officers, and frankly, those numbers were so high that we thought it doesn't wash. So what we did was another study that we just simply compared our probation and staff with the Common Pleas General Division, with the municipal courts, and I think, did we include also the DHS?
Yes.
We made salary adjustments, and I'm not at all going to apologize for that, to get our people in the average range, and that's the average of existing salaries. We didn't go for the highest amount. And in the past, we've tried to work with you, as we did this year, by giving you $70,000 back out of what we originally requested. So frankly, I feel as though that our good faith efforts have fallen on deaf ears. And I don't need to remind you that the courts have the ability to mandate the funds if we find they're reasonable and necessary, and I believe they are. And I believe that the burden falls upon the commissioners to show that they're not. So that's my hard pitch to you. Judges Hall or Howard?
Did you want to give them the comparison graphs?
Yeah, we did run the comparisons of the other departments just to show what you've approved in terms of trend. And that flushes out the fact that the Chamber Court's not being treated as equitably, nor as the probate court, as other agencies. And, my understanding was that this sales tax was to benefit criminal justice, and I feel as though the juvenile justice is not a priority with this board if that's the budget you're going to give us. Thank you for your time.
This graph, the one we put the sheriff up the top of this one, and that sort of it's hard to see the detail at the bottom. So we did another that doesn't include the sheriff, and that would be this one. So it shows beginning in 2010. You can see at that time we were substantially lower than the general division, but about the same as the prosecutor. We took deeper cuts than the prosecutor did. And then when things started to trend up between 2013, the prosecutor came up at a steeper rate than we did, as did general division. And then this year, both the general division and the prosecutor's office got increases, and what you're proposing is actually a decrease, which, as Judge James pointed out, is less than we had in 2010 before we had a criminal justice tax. The others on here, the public defender is in the middle there. They're basically flat. And then I think the coroner and probate court are below. And then this one is just the difference between 2010 and the current. So it leaves out the intermediate years. But we are, of all of these, we are the only one that has a downward slope.
So I think that's our pitch. And Judge Park, if you want to, I don't mean to tell you how to run your meeting, but if you'd like to hear from
I
them.
just had a couple. I had a question. Rick, I just want to make sure I'm right. The $60,000 then for the retirement is in your benefit line or
Correct.
in your purchase? But
Benefit.
okay, in your benefit line. And then you remove $70,000 from your purchase service line.
Correct. That's what we are showing you. As the judges talk with me in terms of the budget, again, they're talking about a total appropriation, so we're not as concerned in terms of a line item that you would appropriate, looking for, obviously, those line items to add to make the total appropriation. But certainly, to answer your question, yes.
Chris, question for you. Where are most of the departments and or elected officials, or have you given them directions as to where they're supposed to put the, the retirement monies?
We did not, most of them used to had put them in salaries. I had not given any direction. That was the feedback I had from most of the departments as to where they usually put them. And actually the forms for next year on the salary schedule, there's going to be a line item added for retirement buyouts. So for those that are identified, it's clearly laid out.
We do recognize, and again, I think it's been discussed to some extent, it may have been discussed at the budget presentation, we recognize that there's been an issue with the way county government as a whole has dealt with the retirement issue. We've just simply not set aside monies for those kinds of anticipated expenditures, or have we identified them well? And that's something that we wanted to, we're kind of going this step by step. This is Chris's first year. I think we made quantum leaps in the nature of the presentation they made this year and the information they requested, but that was an area that we do identify, and so I do understand what you're saying when you tell me you needed to set aside $60,000.
Which also in that benefit line, though, you did identify some employees as family plan employees and not single family. Is that a correct statement? I mean, we know.
Incorrect. Are
we
you
know-
saying incorrectly?
I mean,
Are you
we
saying-
know, did you not identify some or somehow pad that account with showing employees as being on the family plan when in fact they are only single plan employees for benefits?
If that was done, I had to go back and check. That was a mistake. That was not done.
Did I misunderstand that, Chris?
We did have, there was padding in that line because we wanted to be, if we have an employee that's single and they end up having a child, or they get married, or if we have an employee that's not taking any benefits at all because they're relying on a spouse's benefits, and that spouse would lose their job, and then they would come back and avail themselves of our coverage. We wanted to have some cushion in there for those things happening. And I think what you had just indicated was that we have 25,000 in there for that. And if two people came in and that were getting no coverage, came in and took full coverage, that would eat the entire 25,000.
The sheet that was provided in the budget presentation, the salary schedule, there were 6 employees that were noted as family on that schedule that then were actually singles.
On the pay adjustments, when I asked the question, and I believe it was on the 9th, that the adjustments were going to be done this year, you said correct, but they were actually already done, correct?
Correct.
They were already done.
Yes.
They weren't planning on being done this year.
Right.
And how many probation officers does the court have then? I'm looking at this comparison of probation officers between the common police court, your court, and the municipal court.
Those with a title of probation officer are 13. There's intake officers, which are 4 similar kinds of positions. Pretrial officers, 3. So those are
Okay, say that again, I'm not.
Pretrial officers
I'm
are
not familiar with
three.
your positions.
pretrial officers are 3. Intake officers are 4. Probation officers, I believe is 13. I believe is the number.
I just wanted to circle back. Judge Howard, I think you had spoken to it, with the employees that can flip from single to family or
Right.
aren't on coverage and the like. And that was one of the things, speaking to Rick after the budget presentation, is, when those things happen, that's a perfectly legitimate thing for then a department to come to the board for an additional appropriation, because that's a material change in what those assumptions were in the budget. Because I would only throw out that with 25 departments, that if everybody puts that cushion in, there's another $400,000 or $500,000 that when we've got a budget line that we then have to cut from other departments to get there. So that's why in trying to work through those, we were trying to tighten those lines as best we could to try and get to what those real numbers were, because every dollar that was padded, and probably a bad word, every additional dollar as cushion, there's no good word for it, where I'm trying to get with it, that the departments were doing, especially this year when we had to cut $2 million from the request, were dollars we had to take from somewhere else. So that's why the work was done, to try and work through those as best we could. Again, because if that does flip, that's perfectly legitimate to come back and say we had 3 employees flip, we need an additional $20,000 for our benefits, that the board can then reappropriate when it's needed.
Well, I'm glad to know we can do that. I'm not sure that was always the case.
I'm not saying that it's an automatic. I'm just saying it's the opportunity that's there, because that is a material change to the budget assumptions you had.
You indicated there are 6 people that were listed as family that were single?
At least on the audit that, from the...
I can't imagine we've got, I've got... I've got 10 plus listed as single. I surely don't think we have 16 plus singles. I'm not sure where that came from.
That was Carol pulling off the actual health insurance invoicing.
Yeah, I'm looking at the people. If that was an error, I don't know where 6 additional people came from who are receiving single coverage. But yeah, I'm just clearly, Commissioner Creighton. If that's a mistake, I'm willing to admit that. I don't see it looking at it, but I'm certainly more than willing to look at it. But I don't see it. So.
Well, it was
It was in the letter, wasn't it?
yeah, there were 9 employees on single. The 212 audit had 12. 35 families. The audit had 27.
I've got 9 listed on the sheet that submitted as single. Isn't that what you just said?
That's what you had. 12 was what the audit showed. That there were 12 as singles.
Okay, that's a difference of 3, not 6.
There are 3 that aren't on, 3 employees not on the health plan at all. They were listed as families.
Okay.
And then 2 that are on the opt-out, as opposed, so it's $200 a month as opposed to $1,400.
Okay.
So it's the combination. And I thought that sheet was in the letter that came out to the court. And again, I can get you the names.
Yeah.
When you say the letter, you mean Commissioner Burnaby's letter?
Yes, sir.
Okay, there were attachments to that?
I didn't get any.
Here's this.
Yeah, that's it there.
No, so not that detail sheet.
No.
Okay.
Anything else on the family court side of this discussion?
I guess my frustration, one of my frustrations, is that while I understand how you answered Richard's question the day of the hearing, wouldn't it have just been easier for us to talk about it at that time? I mean, you had already given the increases retro, yet we left with the impression that it was going to happen sometime this year. I know I'm getting technical, Rick, but I mean, really, I mean, we've talked about these things before, and you know that we have begged everybody to stay with the 2%. I understand your authority. I respect your authority. But I also understand my responsibility as the appropriating authority. And I guess in some ways, I'm going to be honest, I felt like I was misled. That why didn't you just tell us, yes, and we've already done it and doggone it, just as you said, Judge, I'm not going to apologize for what I did. Why wouldn't we have talked about it at that point?
I don't understand what you're saying. The raises went into effect January 1st. The salary adjustments went into effect January 1st. You were given this chart in our budget presentation and told about our intent to adjust those probation salaries.
No, go ahead.
And I think trying to bridge the disconnect. I think because if you look at the chart that was provided with the budget presentation, it showed a 2013 and 2014 rate, and to their eyes, they only saw the 2%. Where the 2013, those went into effect, as you said, January 1st. The 2013 rates were actually $60,000 less. So in comparing the year over year, that chart didn't show it accurately. And to the commissioners, they saw the 2%.
We intended to give those adjustments and raises the first of the year. That's when you got them.
Originally, those raises were intended to go into place in the last payroll period of 13. And when the budget was submitted, and that's what the judges wanted, when the budget submitted documents on the 24th of December, that expectation was that that was going to occur, and that did not occur based on the auditor. So that did not occur. So that information was given to you, and then, I mean, it was not changed at that point because that was already submitted. So I apologize for that, but that I talked with Chris about that. That was the expectation of the judges, that was to be put in place at that time. So that's why you didn't see that, and I didn't recognize in terms of that document, in terms of how that was going to be perceived by you, that this was something that you wanted to do that comparison with. And until we saw that, it's like, okay, now I get that.
Anything additional on that?
Well, just explain one other thing to me. This, when we look at the 2013 annual salary per the documents that you gave us, and then the documents, the actual numbers that was given to us by the auditor, there was obviously a lot of pay adjustments done in 2013, correct? Am I reading that right?
No.
No, they did the 2% in 13.
Here's,
Because these numbers had already, they had anticipated the raises already being in place to be reflected there. So that included these raises already.
yeah, they included
When
these
they
raises.
When they presented this,
Which
the intention.
was the expectation that would go into place in 13. That did not happen.
2013.
And so Commissioner Creighton is saying, when did this happen and why weren't we told? That was the first of the
That's
year, not the end of 13.
At the end of 13.
Okay.
So that was not,
Okay. Very good.
So the issue at hand on the issue of salary adjustments is what, a total of, is it $62,000 or what amount is it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's the difference.
$2,000. And that's this column, 2013 salary difference.
So it's actually 45,000 because of the two that Rick had previously mentioned already. That 62 is the whole enchilada. Those two employees that did switch positions that I accounted for actually reduces that down to about 54,000.
Okay, that's the bailiff law clerk. Is that one of them?
Yes.
I won't say anyone's names here, but okay, that's one. And the other position would be the, what is that?
Intake supervisor.
Where is that? How far down is that?
We're just below the mill.
4176.
Yes.
So pull those two out of there. Yeah, those are new positions for them.
And you said Bev as well, correct?